Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We were to have had Niall Fraser with us to give us a campaign update, but he's busy with something tonight, some sort of campaign event, I would assume. But we have got three special guests joining us later on. I'll introduce those in just a few seconds. First of all, a quick update. Our Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election campaign continues apace. All sorts of things going on there. Lots of very positive reactions. On Thursday this week is the Women Won't Waste Women's Issues hustings that Niall is going to. I don't know what response they've had from the other parties. I think maybe the Conservatives will go. I'm not sure the other parties are going to go, but we shall see. The venue's cancelled it. Cancelled the booking, usual story. Doesn't align with our values type nonsense. So hopefully the venue will be sued. But there will be a new venue. That will be on Thursday night in Rutherglen. So keep your eye on our social media, and if you can make it along to that, see Niall in action. If you're a friendly face in the audience, that would be fantastic. If you're free to help with the campaign any day this week, again, just email Niall. Tomorrow will be the street stall in Rutherglen High Street, 12 till 2, outside the Exchange Shopping Centre. On Thursday, there will be canvassing door to door. I'm not sure the meeting point for that, so just email Niall with double L, niall.fraser@scottishfamily.org, and he'll be able to tell you where to meet. So just keep an eye on our social media. And then on Friday, we'll have I think, the stall in the street, and then we're going to give some leaflets out as people are leaving Cambuslang Mosque, and we're going to give some leaflets out as people are leaving Rutherglen Mosque as well, later in the evening. I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock or something. But we've had very positive reactions when we've campaigned outside mosques so far, so we're going to do a little bit more of that. Something else to mention before we get into the main discussions this evening. Scottish Family Party Conference will be on Saturday, the 11th of November, and it will be in Glasgow. I can't remember the name of the venue. You'll see it on our social media coming up tomorrow. It's very near the city centre. It's not within the low emission zone, so you'll be able to drive there in your car. And the conference is going to start at 1 o'clock and finish at sort of about 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then immediately after then, for all the attendees, including in the price, there will be a drinks reception until 8 o'clock. So that the social side to it, will be at the end. It's only going to be £10 because we're not providing lunch. You're going to have lunch, then come along. We'll provide drinks and refreshments, and then the sort of drinks and canapes at the end as well. So that's the plan for the conference, Saturday, the 11th of November in Glasgow. So do put that in your diary. Right. It's time for our guest this evening. We're joined by our Deputy Leader, Phil Holden. Welcome, Phil.
Hi. Good evening.
And then we have a rare double guest here. So welcome to a familiar, I was just going to say a familiar face. The picture's not brilliant, but I think we can see. Yes, we've got Phil Tanser, long-time family party supporter in lots of different ways, and also Reverend Alistair Duncan, who is staying with Phil at the moment. So we were in a Zoom chat the other day, and we thought it'd be great if Alistair could come along as well. Just to clarify, I don't know if Alistair wanted me to clarify this. Alistair's not a sort of member of the Scottish Family Party, so he's sort of here in a sort of family party capacity, but he's here as someone that we're very much looking forward to hearing his perspective on all the issues we're going to talk about tonight. So welcome to the two of you in Durness as well.
Hello.
Hello. Now, the first issue I've just heard about today, and it's from a primary school in Scotland. I'll save the details just for now. Primary school in Scotland, where they have a non-binary teacher who's a woman, basically, but she says she's non-binary and calls herself Mix, and then her surname, like MX. And insists on the pupils using that appellation as well. So Mix Smith, or you get the impression. And the pupils have been expected to use that description. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's a first in a school in Scotland. What's your take on that?
For me, something I wouldn't do, I think. Yeah, I've kind of gone with the line of not using pronouns, or if somebody is identifying as a man, and they're biologically female, or the other way around, I tend just to use whatever their new name is, if they have a new name, and try and avoid the use of pronouns.
Now, what would happen to you is you would be docked house points for that, apparently.
Oh, no.
There's a house competition system in the school.
Yeah.
And if you don't say mix or however you pronounce it, you lose house points. So that's your team on the back foot there. Phil?
The problem is, of course, in regards to pronouns, you can actually avoid pronouns. But saying like Mr. or Mrs., or in this case, mix, you potentially can't avoid it in certain settings. So it's even a step more intrusive. And yeah, let's just say my view or my plan not to send my children to school in the future and to homeschool becomes more and more concrete.
Yeah. So just clarify, this teacher's got a class of 8-year-olds at the moment. Alistair, what's your take?
There's an abuse of power there, because the children don't have an option not to use the title that they're being required to use, because that's just part of the code of respect that will operate in a school situation. So there's an imbalance. It's not that the children have any opportunity either to understand or to exercise choice or will in a situation like that. So,
on one hand, I actually moved my opinion towards keep it coming. So I almost want them to become more and more absurd and more demanding and bananas, because hoping that at one point the parents will speak up and will actually revolt, similar to what they do in some parts of America. Unfortunately, I'm not sure Scottish parents currently have the organization or the spine to actually speak up, but I hope they prove me wrong.
Well, there's a few parents at this school who are expressing disquiet to each other. Now, I would imagine with this story, it's going to carry on. I mean, through the year, there will be incidents where, child is told they've lost house points. So I think it will build up through this. Parents will become more and more unhappy. Maybe it will get to the point where there'll be a critical mass that will take action. But it certainly is only one that we will monitor. I hadn't heard of that before. We've got the situation with our friend, what's his name? The drag queen. Can't remember John Naples Campbell.
No.
Yeah, John Naples Campbell. The drag performer who was a deputy head teacher. I think a lot of parents complained that this was not appropriate and that he was using his position to promote his own personal beliefs to the pupils. So he ended up, it appeared to be that he left teaching for a while, but then before we knew it, he was doing a headship course, and he is now a head teacher in a school.
Yes, he is the head teacher in the school down the road from where I live, so in the next village. In our primary and secondary school, he's the new head teacher, and it's quite amusing because when that position was open, I actually talked to my wife and I said, oh, maybe we're gonna get a new head teacher who might be open to listening to us, because Masidi and I wanted to go to the school and say, we are planning on having a few kids. We are willing to homeschool them, but if the education in the school is neutral and not woke and not political, then we would give them to the school. And my wife and I, we got very excited about that prospect. And that same evening, one of the other parents sent me a link and says, by the way, this is the new head teacher. And I said, homeschooling it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I've got a personal dilemma you can help me with. Let's get the comments on. Let's get the comments on. Yeah, thanks for your comments. Do keep them coming in. All right. Right, look, Kirsty, is this mixed Cranston or Gilberton Primary School? It's not. So obviously this is not unique. It seems like there's others. I see primary one. Oh, that's even worse. Even worse. Oh yeah. So okay. Yeah. So there have been other cases as well. Right. My personal dilemma. Okay, I'm needing wise counsel on this one. Everyone in the comments as well. Now, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, an interview with someone in Motherwell who does podcasts and puts them on the usual sort of places. His unique selling point is there is a tattoo artist. And what he normally does is the people he's interviewing, he interviews them while he's giving them a tattoo. But the tattoo is not compulsory for the interview. You can't go along and sit in his studio and just have a chat without having a tattoo. And my question is, should I have the most ridiculous small little dot on my arm just to enter into the spirit of it? And also to enable me to win every time you play these sort of games where you have to say things true and false about yourself. No one would ever believe that I've got a tattoo. So can you share your advice, please? What should I do? Phil, what do you think?
I'd go with no. I wouldn't do it.
You go with a no.
Yeah.
Alistair, what do you think?
No, I mean, I'm too old now to consider getting a tattoo. I think if I were ever to get a tattoo, I might get Hebrew scripture or Greek. I might get Old and New Testament scripture because that's never going to go wrong. But at the kind of time interval you're talking about to decide what tattoo I would want to have for the rest of my life, no, you need to think long and hard about that.
It would just be a dot. It would just be like a tiny little dot.
Freckle. But you can pass it off as a freckle or a mole, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
I'm of the belief that when you get a tattoo, it should have a meaning. So if you get a tiny dot, even that tiny dot should have a meaning, even if it's just a meaning to yourself. So I'm not against the idea, and it's something that only you know about, apart from sharing it here live on podcast, obviously. But I'm not against it, but you should connect it to a meaning, preferably to your faith or your family.
Okay, Gareth's saying SFP. It's not going to be that long. Nothing that long. I was just about to say, I'm amazed my mum hasn't made a comment yet, but
Yeah.
I think she's just kidding there. Desecrate the temple. Right, very rich. Right, we should. What was this last one? Where are we? Didn't occur self mutilation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hang on. Is this Oh, it's good. Hello. Right. So discussions are ongoing. Are ongoing. So I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. That'll be great. Right. Thanks for your advice on that one. Right. Let's go to our main talking point of the evening. Probably what's going to be the main talking point, and that is Russell Brand. That's been a big story, very relevant to Scottish Family Party ethos and policies. So where shall we start? Alistair, would you like to kick off? What's been your take on the case?
Yeah,
so
sure.
far?
I actually find the whole thing quite outrageous. There used to be a principle that said you were innocent until proven guilty. And I haven't caught up with the news. I'm away, obviously, for a few days, but to the best of my knowledge, he's not been formally charged with anything. And I would have questions, even just on the basis of what I've heard already. But certainly there has been nothing substantive. Now, whatever you think about Russell Brand, whether you're for him or against him, like him or don't like him, there's a principle of justice that says that somebody needs to be charged, their crimes need to be investigated, if there are crimes, if there are charges to be answered, and then they need to go before an impartial jury or whatever court process is required, given on what the charges might be. And it seems none of that is included here. It seems to have gone straight from allegation to conviction to condemnation to consequence. And my understanding is YouTube have demonetized him, so his income is now taken a serious hit. And all of that because some allegations have been made, which so far have not been proved or substantiated. So it seems to me an absolute travesty of anything resembling a justice system that this is happening. And as I say, whatever you think about Russell Brand, this is a principle of justice, which is being profoundly trashed, as far as I can see.
Okay, how about Phil Holden? What's your take so far?
I've not looked at it that much. I kind of I glanced at the headlines on the weekend and saw, Russell Brand splashed across everything, and I did follow the case where he was it Radio 2, where he was with Jonathan Ross and they both got kicked off for treating, is it Andrew Sachs that's played Manuel? Yeah, treating him not well, and his daughter and things like that. And I thought that was right that he was kicked off for those things, I think I'm suspicious of this case. I've not seen any of the allegations really, but seeing what happened with Alex Salmon, that makes me a bit suspicious that something like that might be going on there, that he's maybe upset somebody. And I just wonder how you get a case of so many people coming together at once. I don't know what the logistics are of finding so many accusations which come at the same point. How was that coordinated and things? And I think we saw with Alex Salmon, it seemed like there was tremendous pressure when we saw the leak of the WhatsApp threads, that people were like hesitant to accuse him, and they were encouraged in this WhatsApp group to make these accusations as strong as possible. And then we saw that the case didn't hold together, and they wasted a whole lot of money. And it seemed that at the time what was happening was that, Alex was launching Alba and had probably gone to Nicola Sturgeon and I'm thinking of launching this party. This will be a good scheme that will win on the list. And she didn't like that, So yeah, it seems suspicious to me that he's airs some socially conservative views, some conspiracy stuff and things like that. And I kind of imagine that he's annoyed some people in doing that. So I don't know what's going on in it. I'll have to see the evidence, but yeah, interested.
What do you think, Phil? Other Phil?
So first of all, he has a very colorful past, just like I do, and it's very easy to judge people because they behaved in an immoral way. But there's a huge difference between immoral and criminal.
Yeah.
And I think some people are happy to throw him under the bus or deny him justice and his rights because of lifestyle choices and immoral behavior of the past. I think that everybody deserves a fair trial. Even the most despicable person deserves a fair trial, and I don't think that's what we're getting here. I actually really think that the laws need to change and that there needs to be stronger protections in regards to slander and also in regards to anonymity of people that are accused of crimes like domestic abuse and sexual violence. But what I'm seeing at the moment is that England and Wales, and as far as I know, Scotland as well, they're moving more and more towards reducing the rights of defendants in those cases when it comes to rape, sexual offenses, and domestic abuse. I'm just currently looking at these laws, and they pretty much want to push it so that they can't really defend themselves. And at the moment, we are just talking about trial by public opinion, which is already outrageous. But even if the next step happens, which are criminal charges, potentially, I just don't trust the justice system anymore, because there is an enormous pressure by lobby groups to increase the number of convictions. And we can only increase the number in convictions if you reduce the burden of proof. Realistically, I want more justice for everybody, for the complainant and for the defendant. I want the biggest possible justice, but that's not what's happening at the moment, and I'm incredibly fearful, to be honest, because of the Russell Brand case. We've seen so many cases in the last couple of years. Johnny Depp, Marilyn Manson. Most of you won't know about this case, but false allegations against Marilyn Manson, and the German heavy metal band Rammstein. The same thing. All false allegations, and all by several, apart from Johnny Depp, several women coming together making false allegations that are now proven to be false.
I mean, I think I would take issue with just one small point at the risk of splitting hairs with you, Philip, and that would be it's not trial by public opinion, it's trial by media, because I'm not sure that public opinion has been allowed much airtime here. It's the Sunday Times and Times investigation with Channel 4 dispatches and the BBC. So it seems to me to be, a kind of cabal of 4 significant media outlets that have made their decisions and are relentlessly reporting on it and presenting it as public opinion. But where has the voice of the public been heard? Can it be heard? As we're simply told this is what we ought to be thinking now. So it's a kind of forced conclusion before any evidence has been heard.
Yeah. My main thing with this is looking at Russell Brand's track record when he was in the mainstream. I mean, he was obviously a complete pervert. I mean, he just churned out absolutely degenerate filth. But while he was doing that, he was, cozying up to the Labour Party, BBC, Channel 4. I mean, Channel 4. I mean, that's, they're reporting. But basically, he was a mainstream figure then. I mean, what should have happened is the things he said and the things he did in that era should have resulted in him being completely excised from the sort of mainstream public square. He should have had no public profile in the mainstream with the things he did. But the standard of morality among the sort of media establishment is so low that they could tolerate him, and if he makes money for them, then they'll be happy to put up with him. So it's a bit like with Andrew Tate. So the trial, if these things go to trial, I mean, the result of the trial is not that interesting, really, because I already know what sort of person he is in terms of his values. And I think when you say, we need to find out if the allegations are true. And yeah, I think as people have said, will we ever know if they're true? I mean, if he's found to be guilty, but these things normally, there's 2 people in a room, 2 versions.
Just a second. I just want to say something regarding we know what kind of person he is based on his actions. I would say we know what kind of person he was based on his actions,
but
because
it's historical allegations though as well. So it goes back to that era, I think.
Yes. So I think
I could have said that. I mean, within that era.
We have to give people the chance to change. I mean, he stopped taking drugs. He went through a lot of rehabilitation. He's married, has 2 children. As far as we know, he turned his life around quite a bit.
But within that era, though, that was the era when he was being promoted by the mainstream. So people are obviously pointing out during the era where he was absolutely degenerate and perverted in his output, then everyone was fine with him. But now he's going more down the sort of conspiracy route. Then these allegations have come forward. Now, I think the temptation there is to think, it comes from the top in the secret volcano where everything in the world's planned. But maybe the people who did the investigating, maybe that did motivate them. That they looked at his current output and thought, we don't like that, let's see what we can do to stop him. That's probably the way most investigative journalism starts off, doesn't it? With someone with an axe to grind.
I noticed one thing, and I've never noticed that before, that under the tweets or X's, since it's not Twitter anymore, it's X now, under the tweets or X's from the woman who did the documentary, I saw many comments that were pretty much identical. And I've never seen anything like that before, with words just being slightly changed. And now I'm not saying these are bots, but I've never seen such consistency in comments before. And then the following day, I saw 4 colleagues of her pretty much making incredibly similar comments about this documentary is so accurate. You can't find better journalism. It was very very same-ish messages, and it really reeked of coordination. I'm not saying that there was coordination. I don't have any proof for it, but something felt very odd.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Sorry, go on, Phil.
I think it did feel like there was coordination. Like I only just saw a glimpse of it on Sunday papers, but to see it splashed on the papers and then kind of fresh things on Monday morning, to hear the number of media organisations that have collaborated on this, it sounds like quite interesting to have all those people who are maybe meant to be rivals in some sense pulling together. And yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because obviously if Russell Brand is appealing to the conspiracy crowd, then they're going to lap this up as well, because this will appear as the greatest conspiracy that there is, so they'll all be leaping to defend him as well. And I'm sure he'll go up in their estimation by what's happening.
Yeah. Just going back to the trial by media type issue. This is quite difficult with this because it's normally two people in a room, no other witnesses. So if one of these things, let's say a rape allegation goes to court and he's found not guilty, I would think to myself, that doesn't mean he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And if he is found guilty, I'm not really confident that means he did do it either. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we try to maintain an ethos within society that if people are found guilty, then we all agree they're guilty. If they're not guilty, then we all say, that's. But with this sort of case, I don't really have much confidence at all that they can get it right one way or the other. So his reputation is inevitably going to be damaged. And so people have got the power. If people do make a false allegation, even if it goes to court and it's found that it don't happen, they're not guilty, it's still damaged their reputation. But what can be done about that? I mean, is there any?
Do you sue in those cases? Is that not why we paid huge sums to Alex Salmon?
And was that what Johnny Depp won? I mean, it was a defamation. That was a kind of suit and a counter suit, wasn't it? So there was a defamation part of that which Amber Heard lost. That and he won his because it was a defamation suit that he brought.
So Alex Salmon bought a defamation suit.
So Alex Salmon, he got a lot of public money. Why was that? That was because the case was wrongly constructed. Was that right?
I'm not sure.
Or was it just his costs?
No, I think it was just because the case couldn't come to court and it cost a lot of money to put something together that couldn't then actually go to trial. And so I think it had cost a lot of money, which was then wasted. But yes, in theory, I mean, I remember back in the day, I have a memory of a story about Cliff Richard breaking, and the BBC had, there was kind of overhead before drones, there was helicopter footage of the police raiding his house and so on. And years later, he was exonerated and it was all found to have been nonsense. And he received a substantial sum of money in compensation. So yes, compensation is possible. But as you say, the damage is done. And it's a bit like having a retraction published on page 24 14 weeks later, it's in a sense, it's too late. But there's more and more of this happening now that, an allegation is made, a name comes out. Hugh Edwards was another one. A name comes out, he ends up in psychiatric hospital. We don't hear the end of that story. We just know that an allegation has been made and splashed all over the papers, for several days. So somebody is brought down, their lives are trashed. They suffer irreparable damage to their career or their reputation, and then people just move on to the next one. So it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Mm-hmm. There is no justice. Whatever the rights and wrongs of individuals, whatever we might think about them, their character or what they've done, where is justice upheld?
Well, I to be honest, I think it's relatively simple. It should be relatively simple. Unless there are criminal charges, you cannot report on something like that. Because without criminal charges, there is no evidence. If an investigative journalist finds evidence of a crime, then they should hand it over to the police, and then they can report about it once it's a criminal trial. But I would say in cases like that, I would actually say anonymity until proven guilty.
Yeah.
So as well.
I think it's quite right, though, that someone's reputation can be trashed by things that are not crimes, things that need to go to court. I mean, Russell Brand, there are lots of things that he's done.
Yeah, but these are criminals.
Okay, he can reform, but they should have resulted in going down in people's estimation very severely. Just with this issue, is it inevitable if you have a culture of like casual sex, if you like, is it inevitable that we're going to be plagued by these sort of incidents, allegations and counter allegations like this? Is it, in other words, is the only way to avoid this epidemic of sexual assault charges, rape accusations, is the only way to avoid this epidemic to return to a more traditional standard of sexual morality?
Unfortunately, I think even going back to more morals will not really prevent this. When we look at the case of Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Brett Kavanaugh in America, who was falsely, as far as we know, falsely accused of rape when he was a student, there is nothing to indicate that Brett Kavanaugh lived a life of any substantial immorality, yet he was accused of these actions. So I think even if you live a good life, and there have been quite a few cases of people that are married, didn't cheat on their wives, and somebody made a false allegation against them. Obviously, I'm fully in favor of a society that is more moral, but I don't think that it will universally protect people, unfortunately, because some crazy, evil, narcissistic people are out there that take advantage of other people, both men and women, of course.
Any other thoughts about that? Because it is becoming an epidemic, isn't it? It's becoming so routine. These sort of cases are coming out.
It's a selective epidemic in the sense that there's a kind of narrative theme that it has to do with certain types of allegations, certain types of incidents or crime. And I don't want to diminish for one moment the seriousness of sexual assault or rape and these absolutely where there is, where there's a case to be answered, and that case should be answered, absolutely. But it's a necessary, well, I suppose it's an inevitable consequence of a society that has embraced and if it feels good, do it kind of morality, that inevitably what feels good for me may not feel good for you. So suddenly you no longer have a level of agreement on what is, there's no longer consensus on what is morality or what is acceptable. And indeed, one generation giving way to another may take a different view. And some of the things that are coming out now as shock horror stories are things when, back in the 1970s, rightly or wrongly, they were kind of de rigueur. Now there's a lot in there that should be investigated and absolutely should be called out, but it's very hard to see how you can put the genie back in the bottle. Very hard to see, because society has embraced kind of a kind of moral universe that is boundless in many ways, how you can then reframe or reconstruct unless people embrace morality, some form of morality out of their own personal or faith or theological conviction.
Yeah, I agree. Any final comments on Mr. Brand before we move on? Got lots of other things to talk about as well.
So I'd say on that kind of issue of like changing morality and things like that, it sounds like in order to avoid that, you'd need like a mini marriage, like a marriage which is just for one night or something like that. If marriage is like that, you announce to the world saying, this is my partner, basically, then that's the only way that you could like, I guess, prove that consent was given or something like that, is if you somehow make that public.
No, that wouldn't work, because even if you have written consent, they could change their mind, can retract at any given moment. So what you would have to do is film everything, and that obviously is also abuse if you film things. So there is no way out of this. The only way out, the best protection would be just marry somebody that you can fully trust and stay away from other people. In America, we had the next in line from the president. Oh yeah, thank you. The Vice President Mike Pence. Vice President Mike Pence. He had the rule that he would not be in a room with a woman ever, unless there was somebody else there as a witness.
And the most tragic consequence in all of this is a universal lack or loss of trust between people. Is a suspicion and a breakdown of trusting relationships. I know exactly what you mean, Phil, by a kind of mini contract or level of agreement, but it's hard to see how that would ever stand. And what you have is kind of fundamental breach of trust, and actually a fundamental division. There are divisions opening up left, right, and center, and I mean left, right, and center in every area in public life. But this one, actually, there's a huge divide between men and women opening up, which is just another level of the fracturing and disuniting of society, which is tragic, because the most fundamental bonding within the human race is that between a husband and a wife, which gives the place of security for a home, a family, and children and future generations. And if that trust, or the possibility of trust between men and women, is eroded and lost, then we're all losers.
Yeah, that's a good note to leave it on. To move on to another topic. Thanks very much for comments on that. Just a little snippet from YouTube this week. Remember, Phil and I made a video a while ago where we projected images from the sex education resources of the Scottish government on the side of the Parliament. And the video is quite popular. It's got 40 or 50,000 views or something on YouTube. So I reposted it on Twitter, and we got a couple of new comments. One of the comments was a boy saying, our modern studies teacher showed us this video at school in order to explain how bad the Scottish Family Party is.
Yeah.
So as soon as I'm old enough, I'm going to vote for you.
Yeah.
That's great.
So if you're a modern studies teacher out there, please try and turn your students against the Scottish Family Party. We actually had another. It was a girl actually at a further education college. She was doing, it was either modern studies or politics or something, and her teacher absolutely had a go. Used the Scottish Family Party as an example of not very nice people type thing. And so at the end of the lesson, she came out and joined us, became a member of the party. So teachers out there, go for it. Go for it.
Are we in the curriculum now? Have we made it to the curriculum?
Not yet. I would hope so. We would do soon, though. Yeah. As a case study in what? I don't know. Case study in. Yeah.
Write an essay on why the Scottish Family Party is bad.
Yeah.
Compulsory.
Right. Next issue. This has been in the news quite a bit. Safe drug consumption rooms. What's your take on those? They're going to happen now. It seems like they're going to start in Glasgow. It seems like within weeks. How will that work out, do you think?
Well, I to be honest, things like that have been tried in different countries, and I would like to see the research there. If there was any reduction in drug consumption, there's an argument by consumption. There's an argument by some people that it will not reduce the drug consumption, but it will make it safer for the people, so there are less overdoses and less infections. But is it really our aim to make drugs safer? We need to reduce the consumption of drugs. That needs to be our goal. And I think by creating these rooms, we're sending a message out that it's okay to take drugs, especially to younger people. If we legalize more and more drugs, we say it's okay, it's not dangerous.
Yeah. Alistair, what do you
think? I actually can see the argument for them, because the reality is that people take drugs, will take drugs, do take drugs, often in desperately dangerous ways and situations. I'm not convinced that there will be much take up for them. I suspect there'll be a lot of suspicion around who's policing them, and what being seen in one actually means or implies, and so on. So there's a lot of discussion around it, and people take drugs not because they decide that's a great lifestyle choice, but generally they do it because they're medicating pain because they have a lot of deep-rooted childhood brokenness, and they get into a world, or they grow up in a world where that then becomes or is the norm. So I mean, I have worked with people who have been involved in drug addiction, and so I know that this is a debate that even within that world there's no easy answer on, for the simple reasons that there are people who damage their own lives quite severely by taking drugs, and often they don't know what they're taking, they don't know the strength of it, and so on. There's no safety or control in all of that. So I can see the reasons for it. Does that mean that by condoning it or providing a safe space for that to take place, you're creating an open invitation for people? I don't personally think that's the case. I can understand and respect the argument where people think that might be the case. But I think dealing with a massive problem that currently has unprecedented numbers of people dying because of the ways in which they take drugs and the stuff they're taking is just chaotic. So that's my view.
Okay, well, thank you. Phil Holden, what's your...
My leaning would be against it, I think, just because of the sort of normalization of it. And I do see the kind of argument on both sides and things like that. I think, like, I've spoken to a fair number of addicts, like just through doing things on the street and things like that, as kind of Christian things. And I've often spoken to people who have kind of progressed from heroin to methadone or something like that. And speaking to these people, it was sort of like they felt that they'd beaten their drug addiction now that they were being prescribed methadone. And yet to me, it felt like they were still addicted, basically, that you've just gone from something that you gained illegally to something you're prescribed, but you're in this permanent state of dependency, which is it's a state of dependency on the government as well as on the drug. And I think long term, that's not a great thing. Whereas I've seen like organizations like Teen Challenge, like they have I think like a 72% success rate of seeing people off of addictive drugs like heroin and things like that, I think while there are things like this that are working, then we should be directing people to these kinds of services.
Although the challenge really is that, if somebody gets into a safe injecting room, then the chances are they will have access to professionals and people who will be able to help them take next steps. Mm-hmm. You can't get into a rehab facility if you're using 130 mil of methadone. You've got to get down to 30 mil. And there are no or very few facilities that will help people over a period of time reduce their methadone intake so that they will be at a level where they can access long-term rehab. So the challenge really is to take people who are chaotic drug users, whether that's illegal drugs or prescribed drugs, and to get them down to a safe limit that they can access long-term rehab, which is effective, but many rehab centers can't or won't take them because they haven't reduced far enough to be able to get in.
Okay, I see the arguments, but when we look at contraception and abortion, we thought that by introducing contraception 100 years ago, the abortion rate and child pregnancy rates would go down, but they went up. It was advocated that there needs to be legal abortions because women have unsafe abortions. And what happened? The abortion rate just went through the roof. So I think the argument that when we legalize something in a safe place, the numbers will go down and it will be safer. I don't think that the evidence is there, but I haven't looked into research.
Yeah, I think the question, the Scottish government's sort of way of looking at things, it's very individualistic, short-term, and empathic. So they will look at someone who is already a drug addict and think, what can we best do to help this person? What would they like us to do for them? Almost, it's that sort of approach. So even for that person, that question, what would they like us to do for them now, that might not be what's actually in their best interest. But even if it is, there's still the much wider issue of the ethos you're creating in society. Because ultimately with drug policy, it's people starting is the real problem. You want to reduce the number of people who are actually starting down the road of drug abuse. And that's the real challenge. But I say with the Scottish government, it's more empathy. We look at people with a problem and try and see how we can best help the people who are already on the conveyor belt, the people who are already in this difficult situation, rather than how can we stop more people ending up in it. If you have safe consumption rooms, this is not inevitable. If someone thinks they're going to try a drug for the first time, that would be the ideal place to do it. And whereas they may have thought, oh, this is quite risky, maybe I shouldn't do this, they might think, oh, but I can go to the safe consumption room. That'll be better. Maybe it takes away deterrence from it.
Sorry, the safe consumption room isn't going to provide the drug. It's not like I can go along there and say, can I try this out in a safe environment? A safe consumption room will exist for those people who are already using. I'm not sure if I was wanting to try something out that I knew was illicit, I'm not sure I'd want to go into an arena that is publicly provided and expose myself to, the fact that there were people there who knew who I was, who'd ask my name and so on. I mean, people get onto that conveyor belt illicitly, and they're certainly not going to go to a public provided room in order to do that, are they?
I think you see the same things with the kind of clinics for abortion and all those kind of things that basically, people are told in the education system you're guaranteed anonymity and all these kind of things. The parents are not informed. Parents don't know anything. So I would trust the state to keep those things secret from maybe the people that most need to know.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that the people working in these places at one point are activists as well, that would be activists that push towards legalization of drugs. Yeah,
I had a letter in the Herald last week on the topic. Basically, I think I gave 8 reasons why I thought the drug consumption rooms were not a good idea. And they published a reply to it. And the reply to it was really nasty, really horrible, personal, sort of vindictive, mean-spirited sort of reply. And it just showed that it's all the people involved in this. This is not just, how can we best help people? It's much different than that. I mean, the harm reduction approach to some people, it is like, it's a real core part of their moral system. And I generally find with the harm reduction approach, you get it applied to lots of different things. The people who apply it generally are the people who think there's actually nothing wrong with the thing in question. So the people who take a harm reduction approach to sex education, they actually think there's nothing wrong with teenagers having sex. The people who take a harm reduction approach to drugs generally think actually there's nothing wrong with taking drugs. That's the way it seems to me. In any case,
I'm reading a book by a guy called Gabor Mate at the moment called "In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts," which is, he is a neurophysicist, a clinician, and so on, and it's all about addiction and his experience of working with addicts in Vancouver. So he's somebody who's working firsthand, prescribing, dealing with people with chronic addiction, and so on. And I think, he knows only too well the devastating harm that addiction causes. And yet I think on balance he would come down, recognizing that safe levels of drug use are better than the chaotic and dangerous and self-destructive levels. But I respect the fact that it's not a straightforward issue. But I think there are people in the field who are not in favor of drug use and who see the negative and destructive consequences of it, but recognize that, you're absolutely right, Richard. Earlier on, you were talking about dealing with the causes, but it's not really an either or. There are people who should be prevented from getting into it, but at the same time, there are some broken and desperate souls, whose lives need whatever help they can get now. Now, their help is certainly not just to be using it safely. Their help is to get off it entirely. But where does that help start?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like 3 books that kind of I've read. That there's Chasing the Dragon with Jackie Pullinger, which talks about reaching out to addicts in Hong Kong, you know, and people just really, I guess, delivered from drug addiction, you know, not like a gentle, you know, being weaned off it. It was quitting cold turkey with people praying for you 24 hours a day while you're going through the withdrawal. Another book, We Dance Because We Can't Fly, similar thing in Spain. And then David Wilkerson with The Cross and the Switchblade and Teen Challenge and things. And I think within those things, there's been an approach that has really worked. But the problem that I guess that governments would have with that is that it invokes the supernatural, you know, that it's trusting in God's power to actually deliver somebody. And it's taken people being with them 24 hours a day. But the results are there. There've been studies into it which have looked at it and said, yeah, these people are being set free from drugs and they're not going back to them, you know. And so yeah, I think there are things that are working. But you know, drug addiction is addictive, and so you can't stop it by your own power. If there's a higher power, then you know, that higher power can do what he wants. You know.
I think one thing that we haven't mentioned is the drug dealers, and I think the consumers, they need compassion and help, but the dealers really need to be dealt with, and the police needs to put more energy into actually stamping out drug dealing. And it has to be much harder to have access to drugs, especially for young people and children.
Yeah. Okay, right. That was interesting. Let's move on from there.
I need to make I need to react to a comment because it's a very personal comment. Budgie Burger said, being degenerate will become uncool. Look at Alice Cooper. And as a massive Alice Cooper fan, a lifelong massive Alice Cooper fan, I have to say, first of all, Alice Cooper is super cool. He will never be uncool. And he is a practicing evangelical Christian and helps a lot of young people, getting them off the street with music programs. He has like a music school where homeless kids can learn to play instruments to get off the street. So go, Alice.
Yeah, very good. Right, I saw a little video on Twitter this week. You can see it on the Family Party Twitter if you want to see it. It was a couple of gay men, young men, and they were holding up their baby, and they were talking about in very jolly terms about how they'd selected the egg donor to get just the right facial features they wanted. This, that, and it was all very jolly, and they were just assuming that this video would be received with universal congratulation, and isn't it cute? But obviously, I would say this is just eugenics. It's in plain sight, trying to make babies according to the will of adults, and that sort of selection is just straightforward eugenics. And it's one of my frustrations at the moment is that I think this is a really critical moral issue, and yet it's getting virtually zero traction among anyone, among Christians, among Muslims, among media, politicians, anywhere. It just doesn't seem to be registering. But the Family Party is definitely on the case. We're trying to basically explain the issue again and again to people. But what's anyone's take on that?
I wonder what the scale of this is. I mean, you said you went to the kind of clinic or you got the book. How many people are using these services?
I would imagine it's increasing rapidly. I would imagine in Scotland we'd be talking about 4-figure numbers of children born every year, I would have guessed.
Yeah. So I'm starting to see things in the media about it, or starting to see things on Twitter about it. But I'd guess that it's quite a bit more niche at the moment. But it's something that you could see people saying, oh, actually, I don't like this about myself. I don't like that about myself. I don't want my child to have this, you know, and just it becoming a order your baby kind of thing. Build a baby. Yeah.
It's going to start happening with heterosexual couples. They're going to say, well, it's not fair. How come we can't choose what our baby's like? Okay, we've had one naturally. We've had one with the random ingredients. For the next one, let's see if we can, conjure up something a bit different. I'm sure that's going to start happening eventually. But Phil,
I think people that are much more right-leaning than we are, and more the kind that you would find on 4chan, so more the tricksters, I think they should start a campaign along the lines, oh, we found the gay gene and now we can eradicate gay people, or we can eradicate all people that might turn out as liberal or something. We found these genes. So I think if you actually start in a dark, jokey way talking about erasing them, maybe they start to see that it might not be a great idea to erase people based on their genetics.
It certainly needs something to break the issue into the public consciousness, because at the moment it's just not there at all. What do you think, Alistair? Is there a way to get this to the fore?
I'm wrestling a little bit, because I absolutely don't agree with the whole business of designer babies or selecting what you want, because it immediately, as soon as you select what you do want, it immediately is pejorative of certain characteristics and so on, which I think is a can of worms. I also think it lacks the humility of just dealing with what God gives you. As a committed Christian, we're stewards of the children that God gives us when they're born. But I also then, on the other hand, think, well, if gene therapy eliminates Parkinson's disease or dementia, or there are positive advantages in terms of eliminating disease. I mean, every time we take medication, we're in a sense interfering with biochemistry or body chemistry and so on. So I'm aware that there's a whole spectrum of adjustment here, and some of it is the designer end of the spectrum, and some of it is, if we could find a gene that would eliminate certain types of, or any type of cancer for that matter, would we do that? Would we want to do that? Would we say that was a desirable thing? And how do we square that against the kind of designer baby? I want it to have this kind of nose and that kind of eyes and so on. So I'm just thinking out loud here, because I can see that there are complexities in this discussion.
Yeah, I think the key, but with eugenics, we're not talking about therapy. A therapy is something that's applied to a living being. We're talking about eugenics is choosing which human being comes into existence.
But if you were choosing a baby that couldn't get cancer,
I think that would be wrong.
I agree. I think we are already way too far down the road playing God here, and I think we should accept our children the way they are born and the way they are made by God. Also, with the designer babies, in some ways the bigger problem is obviously surrogacy. So we have to completely ban all forms of surrogacy, both in the UK and also people paying for surrogacy outside of the UK. I think women cannot be used as human body bags to deliver the baby that you want. Because in almost all cases it targets very poor people that just need the money.
Just going back to the avoiding health problems through eugenics, I think there's no easily defined border between what's a health problem or an abnormality and something that's just undesirable. So if you think about, say, IQ, for example, where would you draw the line between, okay, this is unacceptable, so we'll make sure this person isn't born, and this person might have some struggles in life. So, the line's going to be drawn somewhere. And wherever it's drawn, it's still giving the message that you value more certain types of people than other types. It's an issue that I've only really woken up to, I suppose, in the last few years. Partly through speaking to and reading the writings of Callum McKellar of the Scottish Council for Human Bioethics. Who's really brilliant on this.
I think there's a value statement which is being made by these things, and I think maybe lots of people missed that in the adoption stuff that happened. That basically, there were lots of cases of Christians being rejected from being adoptive parents, because the argument was made, well, what if your child turns out to be gay? then and you have a view that this is morally wrong, then you can't adopt a child because this might happen, But that was actually making a statement about every parent as well. It was saying that every Christian is unfit to be a parent if they have that view. And now we're seeing that with the conversion therapy kind of laws, saying basically that if you wouldn't affirm a transgender child, then that child can be removed from you. That's the laws that they're trying to put through. And that if you extend that into this kind of area of eugenics, that you have a group of people that are saying, right, we think it's okay to select babies within these confines, then I think you'll see that heterosexual community will say the same thing. Well, we can abort for this reason, or we can. Yeah. It's the right to end a human life or stop a human life. At the moment they're saying it's for severe disability or something like that. But I think you'd see the boundary move to just about anything.
Yeah. My wife and I, when before our first daughter was born, we decided not to have any tests done. We didn't want to know if everything was okay with our daughter, because it wouldn't have made a difference, of course, because we are completely against abortion. And I'm actually even at a point, it really bothers me when people say, and I know they mean well, when they say, in regards to the question, is it going to be a boy or a girl? And people say, as long as it's healthy. It really frustrates me, because I'm like, well, even if my child is not healthy, I mean, I'm going to love it just the same. I will not give it back because it's not healthy. So I think we have to move away from this giving one child a higher value than another child simply because of the way they were made.
Absolutely. And on that noble note, I think we should conclude this evening. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for pitching in. Thanks for all your comments as well. We've put a few of them on. We've been reading those as well. Excellent. And we will see you next week. Remember, campaigning in Rutherglen and Hamilton West will be taking place. If you want to help, keep an eye on our social media. You can email Niall. You'll see his email address there. And we would love to see you helping in one way or another. So thanks, everyone. And good night.
See ya.